Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Naomi, and today I want to share with you my Ayurvedic guide to activism. Okay, now if you're unfamiliar with Ayurveda, don't worry, in just a moment I'm going to break it down. But before I do, I want to talk about why this is so important to me. I think, more now than ever, if you are like me, you might on some days just feel completely stressed out by the news cycle, by, the potential for the future, by all of the things that have been happening in the world lately. You might feel overwhelmed and helpless and frustrated, and you don't know what to do, right? You might feel full of rage and you want to be able to direct it safely, but you don't know how. Or you might on some days feel like you just want to get back into bed and pull the covers over you, and wait until everything is better, right? And get back out when everything is better. And the truth is that I feel all of those on different days, depending on the day that it is. So I hear you and I feel you deeply. And what I want to share are some insights from Ayurveda to really simplify the process of acting instead of getting stuck in inaction, so that you have really specific ways to take steps to create change in the world. So if you're less familiar with Ayurveda, let me break it down just a little bit as quickly as I can for you. So Ayurveda is a system of wellness that originated in India thousands of years ago, and has evolved a little bit over time. But really, this system takes a look at the world through the lens of the elements. Okay, and it kind of breaks these elements down into three different categories. Okay, so the elements that we're looking at are air and space. Yes, those are two different things. Air and space, fire and water, and earth. Okay, and Ayurveda organizes these into things called doshas. And doshas are really just ways to categorize behavior or action, or even just the way that things show up in the world. There are three doshas, and each of the doshas is made up of two distinct elements. So you have Vata. Vata is composed of air and space, or ether. Sometimes it's called ether. Pitta is composed of fire and water. And Kava is composed of water and earth. And so each of these elements really shapes the way that that dosha might show up. Okay, and it shows up not just, in the bigger picture, the bigger perspective of the world, but they show up in each one of us, right? So the way that you can think a little bit about the doshas is really just from a basic perspective of stress response, right? And if you want to learn a little bit more about the doshas, you can click on the link in my description below, and there's like a little quiz that you can take, and it'll give you more information about the doshas. But the way that you can think of it is this, right? Vata manifests as air and space, so it tends to show up in people as creativity and quickness and, a sense of spaciousness, right? A sense of connectivity. It can show up, in the stress response. It shows up as anxiety and fear, right? Like we respond with anxiety and fear, but it can also show up as, happiness and joy and this effervescence for life, right? So it's always two sides of the coin, okay? Pitta shows up as fire and water, so it's very dynamic, right? Very combustible. Pitta is, like sort of rooted in the idea of conflict in some ways, right? Like butting heads a little bit, two things that are very, very different. So, Pitta is about strength and leadership and fire and intensity and power. It can also show up as anger, defensiveness, conflict. So again, two sides of the coin there, right? And then Kapha shows up as earth and water. And so Kapha usually manifests, in ways that sort of look like nurturing and comforting and care and love, and steadiness, right? Strength in a different way, right? Power in a different way, sort of that sense of trust and safety. But it can also show up sometimes as depression, or stagnation, right? Like the inability to move forward. So that's how the doshas kind of show up, and that's often the filter through which we see things, okay? The doshas are also the filter through which we experience things, because everybody, just like the universe is made up in different ways, by the doshas, right? Through these elements, every person has a unique combination of these doshas within them, these qualities within them, right? So if you are somebody who reacts a little bit more to stress with anxiety or fear, you might be a little bit more Vata dominant. If you're somebody who responds a little bit more with anger or, conflict or defensiveness, you might be a little bit more Pitta. And if you're somebody who responds to stress or, these really trying times with depression, right, deep sadness or, a sense of like immobility, right, stagnation, then you might have a little bit more kapha in you. But these show up not only in the world that we live in and in our own lives, but also in the cycles of the world, right? Like in, the months, the seasons, the times of the day, it really kind of shows up everywhere. So once you get to know Ayurveda and the doshas a little bit better, you start to see it in everything and everywhere, which is pretty cool. So how does this come into play with activism and, with the idea of creating change in the world? Well, knowing your tendencies and knowing how you respond to things will absolutely impact, the ways that you engage, right? So, you can engage in ways that are really positive and productive based on your tendencies, or you can engage in ways that are sort of that automatic default. What we're trying to do, what I want to do is not only teach you how to respond, not in the way that is the automatic default, but to teach you to move from a place of greater awareness of your tendencies, and from that awareness, create more informed, conscious action. And that's where this comes into play. So knowing what your tendencies are will give you a greater capacity to respond skillfully, and to act skillfully instead of feeling like you just don't even know what to do and you don't know what your best actions are based on those tendencies. So now that you know a little bit more about the doshas, let's talk a little bit about the Ayurvedic tendency to respond when it comes to Vata and how Vata should respond, for example, in times of stress or tragedy. So in times of stress and tragedy, in times of just uncertainty, Vata kind of goes a little haywire, meaning the tendency is to sort of like panic and to sort of go, oh my God, I don't know what to do, and to like freak out a little bit, which is legit, okay? That is not a bad response necessarily. Like that's totally normal and human, okay? The problem is that then Vata gets really overwhelmed and sort of gets spun out of control, and that Vata overload makes somebody who's very Vata really ungrounded, really unstable, and they feel like they can't act, right? They just don't even know what the best course of action is, right? So, Vata will get so, will allow herself to get so distracted that she actually won't do anything at all, and it'll sort of be like avoiding it, right? Like, oh, this terrible thing is happening. I'm just going to scroll through Facebook for a little bit and, like a bunch of posts to get angry about a few things. And then I'm going to go like work on this other project or work on this or work on this, or I'm going to like, Vata will come up with all the different ways that she can distract herself instead of taking action, because taking action is really difficult, right? And it requires a fair amount of organization and specificity, which isn't always Vata's strong suit. So knowing that, what should Vata do differently, right? Knowing if Vata is composed of air and ether, like qualities that can be really spacious, really disconnected, but also really generative and really creative, what Vata does really well is that she's an idea person. Like she can come up with ways to create change, right? She can come up with ideas for rallies or for demonstrations or for events that will, benefit something or someone, right? She can design posters if she's particularly artistic. She can get friends together, just to talk and to process, to connect so that people don't feel so scattered and alone, right? She can, organize these meetings. In fact, like somebody who's pretty Vata is somebody who tends to hang out on social media a lot. She can use social media not to distract, but to connect, right? To organize, right? She can create Facebook groups for activism, right? For the purpose of, talking about these issues or for creating change, right? To build community and to create support. So, Vata can do all kinds of things when it comes to getting people together instead of scattering, right? And pushing out from the center. She can create a community, which is a really powerful asset. Vata can also do other things like, use her creativity, use her ideas to write templates for emails for people, write templates for letters, design postcards, or, design things that, other people can use to send in their own protest or their own, like if they need to contact a representative, or if they need to, get in touch with a group or something like that. Like Vata is really, really good at, getting all of that, like coming up with ideas for ways to connect. So those are some of the ways that Vata can apply her creativity and her spaciousness to create actual action. Now let's talk about Pitta. So Pitta in general, what happens when, crazy things are happening in the world is that Pitta will just get angry. She rages, right? She'll like, go on social media and like, throw down all the angry emojis and be like, I'm so pissed off, and she'll like pick fights, like she'll post like really sort of divisive things even, just to get a rise out of people, like, even not even get a rise out of people, like just because she has to express her anger and her rage, right? She will pick fights with people who love her even, who might even agree with her just because she's angry, right? She will, like create conflict where there isn't conflict. She will, just kind of like simmer and simmer and simmer and simmer until she reaches that boiling point and explodes, right? So Pitta, in times of, uncertainty, like a lot of times she has no way to channel her anger, which is really difficult, right? Because if you're not channeling your anger, it just becomes lava and it goes everywhere, and it can really push people away and make people not want to hear what you have to say. So what should Pitta do? Okay, I mean, that's a great question, because here's the thing, right? Anger can be inspiring, right? It can be powerful. It can be an agent of change. But I think a lot of times Pitta confuses that anger as inspiration instead of realizing that the anger is not actual action, right? It's not doing anything. In order to channel her anger, she has to actually act, right? So, for example, it's like actually going to marches or rallies or demonstrations, right? Like this is really where Pitta thrives. Not Vata, not Kapha, they don't necessarily want to go, but Pitta, she can. She can schedule like a meeting with her representative. If she lives in a place where she can get to the representative, she can call and leave messages. She can write letters. She has to channel it into something physical, right? Not just like throwing it out into the world and like, hoping that it inspires somebody, but actually doing something, right? Like actually putting pen to paper, actually writing emails, actually calling people, scheduling, these things, going to events, right? Putting her body on the line. That's something that Pitta is really good at, and that's inspiring. That is, like, that's action that ignites and uplifts, because people see that and they're like, yes, right? Like, thank God somebody is out there doing that. How can I now do something on a smaller scale? Like, I might not be able to do the, meet by my representative or do a demonstration or something like that, but, I might be able to do something else. And so, like, seeing people out there, like seeing Pitta out there, like putting herself on the line, that's awesome. Because again, not everybody can do that, right? And I think that's a really important point. Another thing that's really important to think about is that Pitta does really well with schedules, right? And routines. She thrives on that. She loves consistency, right? Because it's something that she can control. And so, if you are somebody who's really Pitta, the idea is like, put it on your calendar, like one day a week, right? If you are feeling like you need to take action, like make Wednesday your day that you, like call your representative, make Wednesday your day that you sign all the petitions, make Wednesday the day that you, like write those letters, write those emails and send them, like, and make it at a certain time, right? Every day you give yourself 15 minutes and that's it. Right? Obviously, that wouldn't apply quite so much if you're going to demonstrations and rallies and that sort of thing, because that could happen any day. But if you give yourself like 5 minutes, at a certain time every day to do those things, to actually act, then Pitta will feel productive, which she loves. Pitta loves being productive. Loves it, loves it, loves it, loves it. Okay, so give yourself a schedule, give yourself something really clear if you're more Pitta, so that your action is more channeled and focused, and in that way, more lit up. Now let's talk about Kapha. So Kapha is composed of earth and water, which means, Kapha is really sensitive. She is a sweet, sensitive soul. And maybe not sweet. I mean, that doesn't describe all Kaphas. But, Kapha in times of, like craziness, in times of uncertainty, Kapha just retreats into herself. Like she just doesn't want to deal. It's too hard. It's painful. It is not fun. So Kapha is pretty inclined to like crawl back into bed, pull the covers over her head, and wait until things get better. Mostly because she feels like her actions don't matter, right? She feels like there's nothing that she can do that is going to make the world better, right? So she sort of feels like better to not do anything, right, than put myself on the line and just feel like a failure. The thing is that doesn't really work when it comes to activism. And Kaphas are activists too. Kaphas do want to create change in the world, right? They just don't always feel like they can. Kaphas have really big hearts, but getting motivated is really difficult for them. So Kaphas actually work better one-on-one. They work better in smaller situations, right? So Kaphas might not feel comfortable going to rallies or marches or demonstrations, right? Kaphas might totally freak out at that idea of putting themselves on the line like that. So Kaphas are a lot more inclined to do things from home, right? And not necessarily even calling people, right? Like they might be more like, hey, let's get together and stuff envelopes, and like send, like postcards, they might do better like volunteering at really small local organizations, right? Kapha, does a lot better in terms of getting together with a friend, a single friend, having somebody for accountability, because that super duper helps Kapha, who always needs accountability. Kapha does better with that like one-on-one and saying like, hey, let's motivate each other, like let's help each other. Okay, so it's really like Kapha might not go door to door for a political candidate. Kapha might not go to those like big rallies and marches, but Kapha can accumulate, right? Kapha is really good at getting people to donate money, like for real, right? Kapha is really good at collecting things, like holding on to things. That's the quality of the earth, right? So Kapha, it might be more about like organizing fundraisers, or convincing friends, of things that they really believe in, right? And, using the power of, their heart, of love, of connection to say like, hey, this is really important. Kaphas are great at that, so think more about like, how can I, raise consciousness or raise money or raise awareness of something like that is really in Kapha's skill set, right? So that's what Kapha can do as an activist. So can you see now how knowing your own tendencies can make a huge difference in terms of the way that you act, right? Like if you are somebody like Vata, is somebody with more of a Vata tendency rather, like, your course of action is not going to necessarily look the same as somebody who's more Kapha or more Pitta. If you are somebody who's a little bit more Pitta, you are definitely not going to work in the same way as Kapha, right? Or Vata, right? And people who are Kapha are not going to use their bodies, are not going to use their words in the same way that, angry Pitta is, or, like super connected Vata, right? So knowing your tendencies can make a huge difference and can make you so much more effective as an activist. So hopefully getting a little bit more understanding of the three doshas and Ayurveda will give you more insight and more tools to make your activism more effective, more powerful, and, like just make you feel like you are actually creating change instead of feeling like you're not really doing much of anything at all and getting frustrated by that. So let me know if this has given you some really useful information. You can let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. You can let me know if you're Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, especially if you've taken that quiz that is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in, for choosing to move in the direction of creating change and being a part of that change, right? And using your awareness of the doshas to create more effective change. So I look forward to chatting more about you, more with you, and more about Ayurveda and more about the power of transformation and creating powerful change again really soon. Okay, until then, bye.